So last week we looked at how we could felt a fine sample, and when I say fine, I mean a fine merino layout with viscose on top of it. So we had a look at how we could felt this with soft and gentle felting and fulling methods. And so the idea is to compare what we've done last week to what we're going to do today. And so we'll be working with a sample that looks exactly like the one from last week, the only difference being in color. So we're going to work again with merino and viscose on top, and I'll just be using a different color. And this week we're going to use other felting and fulling methods, much more aggressive, so that you'll be able to see the differences in the results between felting with gentle methods and felting with more aggressive methods. So if you haven't seen last week's video, I invite you to do so that what we're doing today makes sense to you. Otherwise, let's get started with this week's sample. So now let's felt this sample, this time with more aggressive felting and fulling methods to see which results we get. So I'm going to start by adding water and soap, and I'm going to use a different method now so that I can work directly on the viscose, which is something I was trying to avoid in the previous example. And I will just go on rubbing directly with my hands on the viscose fiber. And now let's try without the netting and see if I can do this. I can, just very softly, but I can. So I don't want to bore you with this. I will just go on with and without the netting, but I'll just go on rubbing directly on the viscose. When I have a pre-felt, I will then change my felting and fulling method. For now, I'll go on like this. So my fiber has started to pre-felt, and what I'd like to do now is flip this so that I can do some rubbing on the back as well, because I've only been rubbing on the side of the viscose. So I'm going to do some rubbing here as well. I will work a little bit on the corners because they've been a little bit neglected. So on the corners and on the edges, so that I can get some nice straight and full edges instead of these fluffy things. Okay, so now I have a pre-felt. I'm going to squeeze out a little bit of this water to be able to see my felt better. Okay, and now I'm going to use my next felting / fulling method, which is a pretty aggressive one, which is throwing. Okay. Now let's give it another slight rub just so we can make our edges a little bit better again. So again, I'm rubbing on the side of the viscose. And now I'm going to use another fulling method, which is kneading. So again, in my opinion, a bit too aggressive for this type of project, but we'll see what happens. So let's stretch it out. Give it another rub again. Again on the side of my viscose. And now I'm going to give it a slight rinse, and I'm going to compare it to the size of my previous one because I want to keep them in the same size. So, and there's still a lot to shrink, so I'm going to go on with my rough fulling methods. See if I can get more shrinkage. Going to give it a slight rub again. Again on the side of my viscose. And I may have gotten to the size I'm looking for. So let's have a second check. Not yet, but it's getting close. So let's do some kneading. And let's stretch this out again. And now I think I have the right size. Do a last check. Well, it's okay. Yes, it's okay. It's the exact size. So it's finished. I'm now going to rinse it and iron it, and then we'll come back to compare the two. Now notice, well, it's maybe a bit difficult for you to notice, but I can tell you that it was a lot faster to do than that version over there, okay? It took me maybe half the time. It's difficult for you to see that because my videos are edited, so you have no idea how much time I spent on both. But I can tell you it took me like half the time to do this one, all right? This is an important thing to notice, but not always quicker is better. Also, notice that I only used room temperature water to felt both of them, all right? So I'm going to finish this off, clean this up, and I'm going to come back to you to show you the difference between the two samples. So here are the results from today's sample. While there is a little bit of sheen over here, you'll notice that there is an incredible amount of fiber migration, and in some of the areas the viscose on the surface was practically covered by the wool. Now compare that to last week's sample and you'll see a clear difference. Something I'd like to add is that I used, in both of these samples, I used quite a thick layout of viscose fiber. And what I mean by this is, had I just used a little bit of viscose fiber just to embellish the surface, the results would have been even stronger, meaning the viscose would have completely disappeared. But since it was a pretty thick layer of viscose, there are still places where you can see it, and where there is still some sheen, even though we were using such aggressive fulling methods. Nevertheless, again, here is the difference, and I think it's pretty clear how different the results are. Another thing I'd like to mention, and this is difficult to show on video, so you'd have the chance to experience this amount of detail if you did the samples with me, is that I can feel that this sample is much more even. So it feels like it has the same thickness and it has the same softness all over the sample. Whereas in this case, it feels like there are areas of this felt that are harder than others. So this part here feels a lot softer than this part here. And this has, in this case, it has nothing to do with the layout. So the layout was pretty even, the same as this one. The difference here is that by using fulling methods like throwing, there will be areas of the felt where there's much more force applied, because the force you apply is not even on the whole surface. So if you can remember, in this case we used the rolling method, and in the rolling method the force is applied evenly along the whole surface of the felt. Whereas if you throw the felt, or if you knead the felt, you don't have the same force applied in an even way along the whole surface. So as a result, if you're working with a very, very delicate piece and a very fine layout, what will happen is that it'll feel uneven. It'll feel like it's thinner and softer on some areas and harder and thicker on others. Okay, so my recommendation would be that you experiment and that you do something like this for yourself as well. It's the best way to really have a feeling for the differences. It's pretty difficult to show everything on a video when you're dealing with such delicate layouts. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed these two tutorials, that they have brought you something new and that they will help you make a better quality felt. And if you'd like to go on learning about how to use viscose in your wet felted pieces, I have a class that may interest you, so I'll share the link under this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.